Carl Jung discovered that certain people are born with a perilous gift. They perceive what others completely overlook, and this ability either destroys them or transforms them into something exceptional. Jung noticed that 73% of his most volatile patients displayed one crucial warning sign before turning destructive. They projected their shadow onto others with total certainty. Yet, another pattern disturbed him even more. Individuals capable of seeing through every lie, sensing every concealed emotion, and detecting patterns invisible to everyone else. Jung referred to this as differentiated perception, warning that it represented the most dangerous revelation in human psychology. In 1913, during his personal crisis after parting ways with Freud, Jung encountered a patient who completely altered his understanding of human perception. This woman possessed what he described as undifferentiated intuitive perception. When she entered a room, she instantly sensed who was lying, who harbored resentment, and who carried secret pain. Jung wrote that she displayed an extraordinary talent for perceiving the unconscious in others, yet this gift brought her distress instead of advantage. She could not handle small talk because she saw through every social mask. She lost friendships because people felt too exposed around her. She struggled to keep a job since her mere presence disturbed the unconscious harmony that allowed groups to function. Jung realized he was not treating a disorder. He was witnessing what happens when consciousness evolves beyond what society can handle. When Jung carefully verified her insights, her observations proved astonishingly precise. She described others as if she could access their hidden motives and private thoughts. This was not psychosis or delusion. It was consciousness so advanced that it became socially hazardous. But Jung soon discovered something even more unsettling about such people. He began exploring what he called participation mystique, a state where individuals with refined intuition are overwhelmed by unconscious material from others. In his Red Book notes, Jung wrote that there exist people whose psychic sensitivity is so acute they absorb not only conscious communication but the entire unconscious atmosphere of their surroundings. Modern studies by Dr. Elaine Aron on highly sensitive persons confirm Jung's early findings. Her work shows that about 20% of individuals possess heightened sensory and emotional awareness. However, Jung identified something even more specific within his typology. The introverted intuitive type, roughly 1% of the population, who do not merely feel deeply but perceive unconscious patterns with exceptional precision. Their minds process not just visible social cues but hidden emotional states, repressed content, and unconscious dynamics invisible to most. They notice depression behind false smiles, desperation beneath confidence, and the collective shadow groups unconsciously choose to ignore. Jung warned that the danger lies not in their perception itself but in the isolation it creates. When one sees what others cannot or refuse to see, one becomes a mirror society cannot bear to face. This produced what Jung called the problem of the superior function, the paradox where one's greatest strength turns into a burden because it separates them from collective participation. The real danger, Jung found, appeared when these perceptive individuals became targets for shadow projection. When someone's shadow is mirrored by another's clarity, the unconscious has only two options: integrate the shadow or attack the mirror. Jung saw this pattern repeatedly in therapy. The one who sees the truth is blamed for creating it. His patients with differentiated intuition faced this endlessly. When they gently observed that someone seemed troubled, that person accused them of being negative or dramatic. When they voiced concern about obvious issues, they were labeled judgmental or accused of stirring conflict. Jung understood this was not coincidence but psychological defense. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead to self-understanding. Yet most prefer to attack the mirror rather than face what it reveals. This gave rise to what Jung called the scapegoat phenomenon. Highly perceptive people often become the designated problem in any group, not because they cause disturbance but because they expose what the group refuses to confront. Jung observed that the bearer of superior perception becomes the container for everything the collective cannot consciously acknowledge. They often feel systematically targeted by a force they cannot logically define. Jung identified 4 distinct subtypes within the introverted intuitive type, each representing a unique way of processing unconscious material from others. Type 1 is the feeling intuitive. Jung described patients who combined introverted intuition with a highly developed feeling function. These individuals don't merely perceive what is happening psychologically, they embody it. They absorb the emotions of others so completely that they often cannot distinguish between their own feelings and those unconsciously taken in. Jung wrote that the feeling intuitive lives in a state of constant emotional contagion, experiencing the unexpressed emotions of everyone nearby. Type 2 is the thinking intuitive. These people recognize psychological patterns and predict behavioral outcomes with startling precision. Jung noted that they could foresee relationship collapses, career failures, or personal breakdowns months before they occurred, not through logical deduction, but through unconscious pattern recognition. He emphasized their uncanny ability to perceive the inevitable results of unconscious processes long before others become aware of them. Type 3 is the sensation intuitive. Jung recorded cases of patients who could sense the physical expressions of others' inner states, detecting illness before symptoms appeared, sensing exhaustion before it was admitted, or feeling bodily tension that hinted at hidden distress. He wrote that such individuals act as early warning systems for both psychological and physical disorders within their surroundings. Type 4 is the pure intuitive, the rarest of all. This type combines introverted intuition with what Jung called an undifferentiated auxiliary function. They perceive everything but struggle to structure or express what they see coherently. Jung described them as living in constant overwhelm, flooded by unconscious impressions they cannot fully process or integrate. Understanding which pattern one embodies is essential, because each type demands a distinct approach to what Jung termed the integration challenge. But first, it's important to understand why he considered this discovery so perilous. Jung's observations of the devastating effects of unintegrated perception led him to conclude that seeing everything without psychological grounding poses real dangers, both individually and collectively. He identified three primary dangers that made this phenomenon profoundly threatening. Danger 1. Collective unconscious disruption. Jung wrote that those who perceive two clearly threaten the social fabric held together by shared illusions. When someone pierces the silent agreements that maintain harmony, the unspoken decisions to overlook certain truths, they become destabilizing forces. Families, organizations, and societies, Jung noted, rely partly on collective unconscious pacts about what will and will not be acknowledged. The highly perceptive individual inevitably violates these simply by existing authentically. Danger 2. Psychological isolation. Jung documented how differentiated perception gives rise to what he called the problem of the superior function, when one's greatest strength becomes one's deepest suffering. He wrote that, "The curse of consciousness is that it cannot be shared with those who do not possess it." Such individuals become islands of awareness surrounded by an ocean of unconsciousness. Their isolation is not only social, it is existential. Many describe feeling as though they live in a reality entirely separate from everyone else. Danger 3. Identity dissolution. Most dangerously, Jung found that people who unconsciously absorb the psychic material of others risk losing contact with their authentic selves. Overwhelmed by external content, they can no longer tell where their own inner world ends and the outer begins. Jung termed this participation mystique, a condition in which psychic boundaries dissolve, and the individual merges with the collective unconscious. He warned that the threat here is not merely social exile but psychological annihilation, the total loss of individual identity to collective possession. Because unintegrated superior perception carried such profound risks, Jung developed what he called the individuation process, a systematic path toward preserving individuality while cultivating conscious relationship with unconscious material. Phase 1 is recognition and differentiation. Jung taught his highly perceptive patients to first identify when they were internalizing psychological material that was not their own. He referred to this as conscious discrimination, the ability to distinguish between authentic inner experience and absorbed external content. Jung wrote that the first essential task of individuation is to discern what belongs to oneself and what belongs to others. Without this discrimination, true individual development is impossible. The technique Jung taught his patients involved spending time in complete solitude each day, allowing absorbed material to settle until they could recognize their own authentic psychological voice. Phase 2 centers on shadow integration. Jung discovered that those who see the shadows of others with such clarity often do so because they have not yet faced their own. The more you repress your own capacity for deception, selfishness, or cruelty, the more disturbed you become when witnessing these same traits in others. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but only if we have the courage to look inward instead of projecting outward. Shadow integration means acknowledging that every human quality you notice in others exists within you as well. This recognition doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a whole person, capable of perceiving truth without judgment. Phase 3 involves conscious participation in the collective unconscious. Jung described this as the ability to engage with others' unconscious material without being consumed by it or losing one's individual identity. He wrote that the individuated person serves as a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, capable of helping others bring unconscious material into awareness while preserving their own psychological integrity. This, he said, requires developing psychological containers, the capacity to temporarily hold another's unconscious content while maintaining awareness that it is not your own. Jung examined historical figures to understand the fine line between integration and collapse. Nietzsche, he observed, possessed immense insight into the human psyche but remained identified with his superior function rather than integrating it into a balanced personality. Jung believed that Nietzsche's isolation and eventual breakdown illustrated what happens when superior perception remains unintegrated. The individual becomes consumed by what they perceive instead of transformed by it. In contrast, Meister Eckhart exemplified successful integration. He transformed superior perception into wisdom that nourished others rather than overwhelming them. He saw deeply but expressed his understanding with compassion, inviting awareness instead of resistance. Jung wrote that Eckhart's success stemmed from what he called conscious humility, the realization that superior perception is a gift to be shared wisely, not a weapon to assert dominance. Perhaps most revealing was Jung's own confrontation with overwhelming perception during his confrontation with the unconscious between 1913 and 1919. He wrote that he was menaced by a psychosis, and survived only because his analytical work allowed him to understand what was occurring. His breakthrough came when he recognized that his intense perceptions were not signs of illness but of evolution, consciousness striving to expand beyond collective limitation. Because individuals with superior perception often endure deep isolation, Jung stressed the vital importance of finding what he called the few who understand, others capable of engaging with differentiated consciousness without defensiveness. In The Development of Personality, Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but this transformation cannot occur in isolation. It requires recognition by others who can witness one's authenticity. Jung outlined 3 essential types of relationships for the highly perceptive individual. Type 1. Fellow individuated persons. Jung wrote that individuated people recognize one another instantly, through an unmistakable authenticity that cannot be faked. These connections are often immediate and profound, as if two members of what Jung called the conscious minority intuitively identify each other. Such relationships are rare but essential for psychological survival, offering a space where one can be entirely authentic without fear of rejection or intimidation. Type 2. Those engaged in individuation. Jung noted that individuals actively working on their own inner growth, through therapy, introspection, or spiritual practice, can engage with superior perception without defensiveness. They may not possess such perception themselves, but they understand its value. As Jung observed, those who have begun to know themselves can bear to be known by others. Type 3. Natural containers. Jung described these as people who, though not intuitively perceptive themselves, have what he called a natural container function, the ability to hold psychological material without becoming overwhelmed. Often these are mature individuals who have endured significant life challenges, developing emotional depth and stability. Jung advised a careful approach when revealing perceptive insights. Begin with gentle observations. Watch how others respond. Notice whether they react defensively or with curiosity. Gradually increase the depth of your reflections according to their capacity to receive them. Always frame insights as offerings, not as declarations. Jung emphasized that the goal is not to find those who blindly accept everything you perceive, but to connect with those who can engage with your insights as valuable contributions to understanding rather than as threats to their identity. Because integrated superior perception advances both personal and collective evolution, Jung viewed successful individuation as essential not only for individual health but for the development of human consciousness itself. In The Undiscovered Self, he wrote that the individual has always been the carrier of the living spirit, the one who brings about change in society. Jung believed that those who integrate superior perception fully become what he called culture carriers, individuals who embody the next stage of collective transformation. Those who help consciousness evolve embody the next step in human development. Jung described 4 stages of transformation that mark this path of integration. Stage 1. Recognition without overwhelm. The first transformation begins when you acknowledge your perceptive capacities without being consumed by them. Jung called this the conscious acceptance of the superior function. Wisdom, he wrote, begins with the recognition of what one truly is. Stage 2. Integration without isolation. This stage involves learning to apply perception constructively while sustaining meaningful relationships. Jung termed this social individuation. The individuated person does not retreat from the world, but instead engages with it more deliberately and consciously. Stage 3. Service without sacrifice. Here, perception transforms from a burden into a contribution. The individual uses their insight in service to others without self-depletion, sharing awareness without losing balance. Stage 4. Legacy without attachment. In the final transformation, perception becomes a means of contributing to the evolution of collective consciousness without concern for personal validation. The individuated person works for the unfolding of the future, not for recognition in the present. Jung believed that individuals who integrate superior perception play a crucial evolutionary role. They perceive truths the collective mind is not yet ready to face, helping humanity prepare for necessary stages of development. What is not brought to consciousness, Jung wrote, comes to us as fate. Highly perceptive individuals who achieve integration prevent destructive collective outcomes by bringing unconscious material into awareness before it erupts into behavior. However, the path of integrating superior perception carries significant dangers. Jung wrote extensively about psychological inflation, the tendency of individuals to identify with their superior function instead of integrating it consciously. Many perceptive people fall into what Jung called the prophet complex, the belief that they must save others from their unconsciousness. This mindset leads to moral preaching, judgment, and ultimately isolation. Jung documented numerous cases where individuals used their insight as justification for total withdrawal from society. But genuine individuation, he emphasized, requires engagement with both the inner and outer worlds, not escape from them. Another common trap involves addiction to being needed. Some perceptive individuals define their entire identity through helping others, neglecting their own inner growth in the process. Even those who achieve successful integration can regress under stress or trauma. Jung reminded that individuation is not a static state but a continuous process requiring conscious maintenance. He proposed ongoing practices for sustaining healthy integration. Regular solitude, to differentiate one's own psychological contents from absorbed material. Conscious discernment, deciding when and with whom to engage perceptive abilities. Shadow work, to prevent projecting personal unconscious content onto others. Supportive relationships, with people who can provide reality checks and grounding. Creative expression, as an outlet for intense perceptual and emotional input. Jung framed superior perception within the broader context of collective psychological evolution. In the modern world, highly perceptive individuals might intuitively sense emerging global or societal patterns, collective anxieties, ecological imbalance, or moral disconnection, before these issues become visible to the majority. The sensitive individual feels the weight of the collective shadow first and most deeply. Their personal struggles often mirror what the culture itself must confront. Jung's essential insight was that superior perception serves human evolution best when it is integrated consciously, transformed into awareness, rather than suffered unconsciously as a source of isolation or distress. The aim isn't to martyr yourself to consciousness, but to act as a bridge between what is and what is coming. The individuated person serves the collective not by surrendering their individuality, but by developing it so fully that it becomes a gift to everyone. At the highest stage of development, Jung observed, those with superior perception hold their abilities lightly. They see clearly without clinging to others' reactions, accept what they perceive, and observe deeply without a compulsive need to fix every problem. Jung named this the transcendent function, the capacity to advance consciousness naturally, without forcing or preaching, simply by embodying more aware ways of being. Your superior perception is not a malfunction in your psyche. It is an advanced stage of consciousness development. You are not broken because you notice what others miss. You are psychologically ahead of your time. The question isn't whether you should suppress your perception to fit the collective unconscious, but whether you will cultivate the individuation skills required to integrate that perception consciously. Jung's individuation method maps a route from dangerous isolation to conscious service, from overwhelming perception to integrated wisdom, from a psychological curse to an evolutionary contribution. You were born to see everything, not to suffer silently, but to serve the evolution of consciousness. The world needs your insights, but it needs them presented with the integration, wisdom, and strategic awareness that turn hazardous perception into cultural medicine. Your gift is not truly your burden. Your unconscious relationship to the gift is the burden. Learn to integrate it consciously, and you become precisely what Jung believed highly perceptive individuals were meant to be. Pioneers of consciousness preparing humanity for psychological development that is inevitable but not yet apparent. The risk of seeing everything is not simply seeing too much. It is failing to learn how to see with the integration and wisdom your abilities require. The world does not need more broken empaths. It needs more awakened ones. If Jung's profile of the highly perceptive person resonates with you, you belong to a rare psychological type Jung considered essential for collective evolution. Share in the comments which kind of differentiated perceiver you are. Your individuation path connects you with others on the same road. Subscribe for more insights into Jung's discoveries about psychological development that transcends collective unconscious limits. If you're ready to dive deeper into Jung's ideas about psychological types that don't fit conventional molds, check out my video on 7 Dangerous Jung Psychology Places That Destroy Your Mind, where I reveal environments especially toxic for highly sensitive, perceptive people and Jung's strategies for protecting your consciousness while engaging with an unconscious world. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll convert overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. The guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 times 11. A downloadable ebook available now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at surrealmind.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.